The COVID-19 pandemic showed the world what many of us already know. Supply chains are experiencing challenges, and women workers are on the front lines facing poverty, discrimination, violence, and exploitation. In the agricultural sector, where women make up nearly half of all workers, climate change is magnifying the risks. The solutions are in our hands. The CARE Women's Economic Justice Team helps create economic growth by designing programs specifically for women. We are creating partnerships to drive resilience and grow equity in factories and on farms. CARE and our partners are working with individuals and communities to economically empower women and their families. We help women earn and save more so that households thrive and supply chains grow stronger. Join us.
Please welcome to the stage Michelle Nunn of CARE USA and our esteemed panel.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michelle Nunn. I'm the CEO of CARE USA, and I'm so pleased I have the opportunity to sit with these amazing and powerful women who are leading the way in terms of corporate social responsibility, social impact, and certainly around supply chain transformation and gender equity. And so maybe just to start with, like, why this topic? Why does this matter? I want you all to think about the fact that that most of the people that are living in extreme poverty are smallholder farmers. And then think about the fact that about 40 to 80%, depending on where we are geographically in the world, of those smallholder farmers are women who are putting in the labor, putting in the production. And yet women do not have access to land resources at the same level, markets, seeds, training. They face a whole host of challenges in terms of access to education, access to health, and so we have the opportunity to, I think, tackle that big set of challenges that I just articulated, and we can only do it through private sector and multi-sectoral partnerships. And we also know that we really have to ensure that women have equitable capacities within companies and within these supply chains. So I'm going to turn to the experts immediately and sort of have them tell you a little bit about how their companies have been doing this work and what are some of the lessons. And we're going to try and keep it interactive and also to the point of action. So the first is Michelle Grogg, who's the Vice President of Corporate Responsibility at Cargill, Amber Johnson, who's the Global Vice President for Cocoa for Mars, and also Alicia Vermaele, who is the Executive Director of the Starbucks Foundation and the Director of Global Social Impact for Starbucks. So I'm going to start with you, Michelle, and maybe just you know, the last couple of years we've faced all sorts of external challenges, hunger and conflict, and that's affected all of our supply chains in all sorts of ways. Can you just talk about some of the lessons that Cargill has put forward to deal with some of those externalities? And I should mention that Cargill and CARE have a 65-year partnership. And a really remarkable, I think, journey in which your CEO 65 years ago decided to give care packages instead of sending out Christmas and holiday gifts. And 65 years later, we are doing this comprehensive, systemic, multi-dimensional set of partnerships. And so maybe take it away and tell us about some of that work and what are the lessons.
Well, thank you, and it's such a privilege to be here and to sit alongside Michelle. So yes, 60 plus years, we weren't involved then, but we have been for the last few years, really driving impact in communities all around the world. So you talked about a lot of the challenges that are out there. Certainly we think about climate, we think about conflict, we think about supply chain disruptions that are happening all around the world due to the pandemic and other circumstances that we know about. And so for Cargill, really, it all starts at the farmer. If we're going to feed the world, we have to start with the farmer. And we have to think about what are the key things that those farmers need to build resilience on their farms. How do we build more resilience in our supply chains? So we're focused on the farmer. Second, and you touched on it, certainly a real emphasis on women. We know that when we invest in women, those investments go even further. And so we've been focused on women as the center of our partnership, certainly with CARE, but also through our regular business operations. I want to touch on advocacy because we need those enabling environments in order to make these investments that we're making last. So the advocacy piece is really, really important as well. And then finally, partnership, and you touched on it. And so 60 years, yes, but just in the last 13 or 14 years or so, we've had a tremendous impact together with CARE working across the globe. We have reached 46 million people. We have worked on 34 projects together in 13 countries. And I said 46, but I meant 4.6 million people. Half of them are women, but we're going to get to 46 million for sure.
On our way.
On our way. We're working in places like Central America, where, for example, we're working with tilapia producers that are in our own supply chain, helping to educate, provide that technical expertise that smallholder producers need in order to drive real change and lasting change. These women have formed together. I think there's about 18 of them who formed their own kind of co-op and working together to help mitigate risks, help negotiate for better pricing and things like that as well. So those specific examples are where we see real change happening. I'll pause there.
Maybe one follow-up. Talk about how your employees have been involved in some of the work and how you're bringing them into the equation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have 160,000 really passionate employees at Cargill. We talked about them as advocates and activists getting engaged in this really important work. So advocacy is one way. How do we advocate for the kinds of changes that we need? Providing technical expertise, so leveraging the knowledge and insights that they have in our supply chains to help improve farmer livelihoods. Is another key way that we're doing that. Absolutely.
And one thing I would just add is we were literally just talking about a piece of legislation that is being considered right now in the U.S. Congress. And what we've seen is that Cargill is an amazing partner in terms of bringing their voice to bear around the ways in which the U.S. government can invest in the most effective ways and be most impactful. And so I think not only dealing with your own supply chains, but collaboration, partnership, and also helping inform government policy.
Absolutely.
So Amber, I want to talk about with you the work that you've been doing, especially as it relates to women capital savings financing.
Yeah.
And we have done a lot of work together in West Africa around our savings groups. First of all, what are you finding and learning, and why are you investing in that sort of capital and financing for women? And how do you think that might be applicable to others who are thinking and considering their supply chain work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, as most people know, cocoa is a fascinating category to operate in, and oftentimes we hear about more about the challenges than the opportunities. But when you go and you visit these village savings and loans communities and the women that operate in them, all you see is possibility. And I think for us, I was in Cote d'Ivoire earlier in the year, and I was sitting with a group of women, and I said, what are your dreams? What are some of the hopes that you have, either for yourselves or for your children? And they turned to the Mars associate that leads our savings and loans in Cote d'Ivoire, and they said, we hope that our girls grow up to be like Fatou. And it was just so amazing because they said she comes here, she talks to us, she listens to us, and she enables us to do, what we can only hope and dream to do. And I think for me, it's really one around a great reminder about representation, right? You talked about, 37 to 80% of women being involved in supply chains, but often that voice is not recognized in the contribution that it has. And so for us, it's really around how do we ensure that we are promoting the role of women in terms of household decisions, providing with skills and capabilities associated with financial literacy, entrepreneurship, really putting the benefits that are gained from partnering as part of the VSLAs to work. We haven't reached quite 4 million, but we've got hundreds of thousands of members in our VSLA programs. And just in 2 countries have saved over $9 million. And so imagine the impact that can have in those communities when it's put into other income generating activities. And so I think it's really around how are you ensuring that you're building skills, capabilities, and then providing access and opportunity. And I think that's what's most transferable. The role that women play is not one that is limited to any particular sector, particularly when we enable their agency to come through.
say one more word, go a little bit deeper on what you're learning about women and women smallholder farmers and why in particular focused in there.
Yeah. So for us, I mean, cocoa farming is a hard it's a hard business to be in. And so what we find is twofold. One, that women farmers themselves, one, they just consider themselves as part of just the overall operation. And so that they need to be given a name around, I am a farmer, I am the leader of this farm. But more importantly, what are the other activities that they can do to support the farming ecosystem? We see things like creating female-led co-ops as being a really big unlock. And I know, Michelle, you mentioned that as well, because that's where the decisions are made around driving to better, good agricultural practices, the activities that are placed in terms of what to do with the money that is saved, what to do with the money that is earned. And I think it's there that we have the biggest opportunity, is to elevate, those who want to be farmers into that role, but more importantly, how can they also create other economic opportunities through the entire value chain? And we're actually finding that women are gravitating to that in as much capacity as they are in terms of actual farming.
Yeah. One of the things that I saw when I was in Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana, also this spring, was the diversification, as you say, of the enterprises in which they were engaged, so that they had multiple sources of income, more resiliency, and also, for instance, one part of the dimension of the VSLA or the savings groups that we're working on together is helping support a more also greater variety for nutrition for their families. And
Absolutely.
So we know that when we invest in women, we're also investing in the future in children and their potential and their education as well.
The entire household as well as the community is uplifted when we can have women who bring other opportunities to the table that then enable for income diversity, and that's critical, particularly within the cocoa sector.
Yeah. Alicia, you have, and through Starbucks, have been doing the work of incorporating and engaging women in your supply chain and coffee and tea for many years. Maybe share a few of your lessons, and also I'd love to hear, as the head of the foundation, how you're combining philanthropy and also the business enterprise.
Yeah, happy to. Thanks, Michelle, and so great to be with all of you today. Maybe I'll start with the last part of your question first, in the context of how does the foundation further amplify the work that's happening through the corporation? And for that, just a little bit of context. Starbucks sources coffee from over 400,000 farms in over 30 countries. And if you think about that from a scale perspective, kind of from bean to cup, if you think that we're also in 85 markets around the world, as well as have a global workforce of about 450,000 people, we really are a company that's fueled by people. And in our supply chain, for all of the reasons that you've just heard, especially in our coffee supply chain, women play a really critical role. When we think about Starbucks and our practices, from our very beginning, we've been really focused on ensuring that we're sourcing coffee responsibly and ethically. And we actually launched one of the industry's first coffee standards around our ethical sourcing practices. The reason I share that is because not only do these practices allow us to get a tremendous amount of data about our farms, but they also allow us to source high quality, ethically sourced coffee. That data is really interesting to us because it allows us to see at a farm level across all these 400,000 farms what's really happening within these communities and what are the needs of farmers. And so as we think about the Starbucks Corporation, we're really uniquely positioned to make investments directly into our supply chain. And we do that in partnership with our suppliers. We do it through our farmer support centers and our open source agronomy. We might even have Global Farmer Fund, which is a loan program for farmers. And so those are all investments that we can make through the business to really help and strengthen our supply chain. And those have direct outcomes on yield for farms, productivity, on climate adaptation, and all of that. Where the foundation comes in and where it's really complementary is that we take all of that data, we work with the corporate teams and our agronomists, but we're now looking at those grants and investments in communities that extend beyond our supply chain to make sure in those communities no one is left behind. And so the foundation has been investing in origin communities for Starbucks for the last 20 years, but it wasn't until 2018 where we really said, we have an opportunity to maximize our impact in those communities if we invest in women and girls for all of the reasons that you just heard. If you invest in a woman, you're not just investing in her, but you're investing in the entire community. And so that is the work that we do through partnerships with CARE and other nonprofits, and we're now in about 17 countries where we're really focused on 3 things. Those things are actually, those specific program focus areas are actually designed based on our CAFE practices data. And for us, that was 1, promoting women's leadership, recognizing that women often lack the skills and the confidence to really engage. 2, ensuring economic opportunities, income diversification, critically important for women. And 3, providing access to WASH-related programming, so really focusing on water, sanitation, and hygiene.
So I think as I think about each of these incredible corporate citizens and our partnerships with you all, I do think you are finding interesting ways of blending your philanthropy, but also the business work, the business enterprise. And I think that's one of the things that sets it apart, because I think we all recognize that these are multi-sectoral demands for us in order to be transformational on behalf not only of our supply chains, but also on behalf of gender equality more broadly. Rapid lightning round to end. Can you offer, and maybe just a sentence or 2, one thing that where you're finding hope in terms of the work, and one maybe either call to action or lesson learned that you want to share?
Mm-hmm. So yes, I guess where I find hope is in the people, and I tend to take really an optimistic view on this. I think that there are a lot of challenges, but look at the room that we have here. There are people dedicated to making progress on these issues every single day. And I also think that we have to focus on action and on impact. And I think there's a lot of commitments we're talking about, but I think we have a real opportunity to drive that change, focus on the impact of the investments that we're making through our businesses, through our philanthropy, through our partnerships.
Yeah, so I would say, I think what gives me hope is the amount of collaboration we're starting to see. And oftentimes it's becoming uncommon collaborators that are coming together. I think we're coming to the point where you can realize collaborative advantage for not only yourself, your business, but more importantly, the communities. If we put our knowledge, if we're transparent, and if we're really focusing on what are those critical interventions that are needed to make sustained change in those communities. So I think that gives me hope. The advice that I would give, Mars is a privately held company, and so I'm very privileged that we are able to think in generations. And so really think not the next quarter, not the next year, but long term. We've got a 2050 plan that outlines the impact that we want to make. And to your point, right, saying steadfast, learning, iterating, but really keeping your eye on the prize, that this is a generational activity and not something that is easily achieved in the short run.
Amber, can I just ask one follow-up? Sure. In terms of collaboration, are you collaborating with your competitors or with peer companies, and or is there an example of an unusual collaboration that we could learn from?
Sure. So we collaborate obviously with Cargill is a great partner of ours, and other suppliers through the World Cocoa Foundation. We do a lot in terms of collaborating with our peers, particularly around child labor monitoring, remediation activities and learnings, what we're doing in terms of cocoa forest initiatives. Those are great collaborators, investing in education together, leveraging partnerships like CARE. So we're finding it in a lot of different places, but even still, we think that there's an opportunity to go further.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big possibilities ahead of us.
Yeah.
Alicia.
I'll build on collaboration. I won't repeat the points that you both just made, but I would say in addition to collaboration with others, and in our industry and our peers and across different sectors, I also think we're seeing a consistent trend that the social and environmental impact agendas of companies are being really truly embedded within the companies themselves. And so this is no longer an effort of a team on the side, but this is being executed through all of the different strategic business units tied to executive goals, tied to so many different indicators. And so I do think that that's a trend that gives me hope in the context for how businesses are continuing to truly invest in this work moving forward. I would say in terms of kind of advice and hope for the future, as part of that is I think there's a lot of companies who have great new innovations. I was recently with the CEO of Patagonia, and he was talking about the wetsuit that they've designed that no longer has chemicals in it and it actually is good for the environment. They designed it through R&D, but as soon as it launched, it was open sourced for his industry and for the industry. The same thing is true for cafe practices for Starbucks, which is our coffee verification program. And so I think that's part of what is the opportunity ahead, is not just how do we collaborate, but also how do we continue to open source all of the different innovations and opportunities that we're seeing for social and environmental impact.
Mm-hmm. So collaboration, innovation, action, a real call to action. And I would just add, to scale, I think we have to put advocacy on the list, because that is going to be one of the requirements for getting the big challenges, I think, ahead of us solved. And I would just end, I do think there's a lot of hope and a lot of solutions that we have to learn from one another. So thank you all so much for the examples and for your collaboration and partnership. Thank you all.